It is minus 20 degrees outside. You are parked at a desolate truck stop in northern Minnesota, and your engine just died. Within 15 minutes, the ambient metal frame of your sleeper berth will act as a massive heat sink, pulling every ounce of warmth out of the cabin and dropping the interior temperature to a lethal freezing point. Standard semi-truck cabs are essentially giant aluminum boxes with surprisingly terrible insulation. The factory R value, which measures how well a material resists heat flow, is usually less than R4, meaning a sheet of thin fiberglass insulation is the only thing separating your body from the biting wind. If you do not execute your cold weather bedtime routine perfectly within the next 10 minutes, the moisture from your own breath will begin freezing into a layer of white frost on the inside of your windshield. Your primary line of defense against freezing to death is a specialized diesel-fired bunk heater, typically manufactured by Webasto or Espar. These compact, highly engineered units are mounted underneath the bunk and pull tiny amounts of diesel directly from the truck's main fuel tanks to generate up to 14,000 BTUs of dry heat. They draw less than 5 amps of power from your house batteries, which is critical because if your batteries drop below 12 volts, the truck will not start in the morning. But relying on a bunk heater introduces a terrifying hidden vulnerability that most civilian drivers never have to consider. If the ambient temperature drops below 15 degrees, standard ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel begins to undergo a physical transformation called jelling. The natural paraffin wax molecules inside the fuel crystallize, turning the liquid into a thick, cloudy slush that instantly plugs the microscopic pores of your fuel filters. When a bunk heater tries to pull gelled fuel through its internal fuel lines, the flame snuffs out, leaving you completely vulnerable to the elements unless you have already treated your tanks with heavy-duty anti-gelling additives. Adding a fuel conditioner like Diesel 911 or Power Service is an absolute prerequisite before you even think about turning off the main engine for the night. You have to pour these chemical treatments directly into the saddle tanks and run the engine for at least 20 minutes to ensure the treated fuel circulates through the primary filters and into the lines of the auxiliary heating systems. Failing to do this means you will wake up in a pitch black, freezing cab with a dead heater, forcing you to make a choice that could land you with a massive fine or a ruined engine. Your alternative to the bunk heater is letting the massive 15-liter diesel engine idle all night long to keep the factory HVAC system pumping hot air. But running a 500 horsepower engine just to stay warm burns roughly 1 gallon of fuel per hour, costing $40 a night and spitting massive amounts of soot into the diesel particulate filter. Worse, if your route takes you through states like California, New York, or Pennsylvania, strict anti-idling laws prohibit you from running the engine for more than 5 consecutive minutes, backed by fines that can exceed $1,000 per violation. To bypass these brutal legal limits and save fuel, premium fleets equip their trucks with an auxiliary power unit, commonly known as an APU. An APU is essentially a miniature 2-cylinder diesel engine bolted directly to the truck frame right behind the fuel tanks. This tiny engine runs its own independent alternator and air conditioning compressor, supplying unlimited 12-volt and 110-volt power to the sleeper berth while using a fraction of the fuel. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more breakdown of this heavy machinery, because even with a flawless APU humming right outside your bunk, the sheer geometry of a standard truck cab creates a massive zone of freezing air that will rob you of sleep. The vast majority of heat loss occurs through the massive, uninsulated glass windows of the driving compartment. To stop this thermal bleeding, you have to physically isolate the driving cockpit from the sleeping quarters using heavy-duty multi-layer thermal curtains. These are not standard fabric drapes. They are industrial-grade blankets lined with radiant barrier foil that physically snaps into place along the ceiling track of the sleeper berth. By locking this curtain down, you shrink the volume of air you need to heat by over 50%, but you also trap yourself in a tiny 8x8 foot space where the air can become stagnant and dangerously humid. The human body releases roughly half a cup of water vapor through sweat and respiration every single night. In a sealed, sub-zero sleeper berth, this moisture immediately migrates toward the coldest surfaces, soaking into the mattress and creating an ideal breeding ground for mold. Experienced drivers combat this by cracking the small sleeper side vents by a fraction of an inch to create a deliberate draft, forcing the bunk heater to work slightly harder, but successfully driving the moisture out of the living space. Once the airflow is balanced, your focus shifts entirely to the microclimate inside the bed itself. You cannot rely on standard cotton sheets or household comforters when the metal walls inches from your head are radiating sub-zero temperatures. Drivers operating in the northern tier carry specialized survival sleeping bags rated for -30 degrees, constructed with synthetic loft insulation that retains its trapping efficiency even if it absorbs ambient cabin moisture. You lay this bag on top of a closed-cell foam mattress topper to prevent the uninsulated storage compartments beneath the bunk from sucking the heat directly out of your back. This setup keeps your core temperature stable, but the layout of the truck stop parking lot outside introduces an entirely new set of disruptions to your sleep cycle. When you pull into a mega truck stop like a Love's or a Pilot in the dead of winter, you have to carefully choose your parking space based on the wind direction and the equipment of the trucks around you. If you park downwind from an older model truck that is forced to high idle all night to keep its air pressure up, your cab's intake vents will pull in a constant stream of toxic diesel exhaust fumes. Share this video with a friend who loves trucking, especially if you want them to see how drivers look for designated idling rows where trucks are packed tightly together, creating a mechanical windbreak that shields your cab from the crosswinds that strip away your interior heat. A growing number of modern truck stops now offer specialized shore power spaces, often managed by networks like Idle Air. These spaces feature overhead trusses equipped with heavy, insulated yellow conduits that window mount directly into your passenger door frame. This system pumps filtered, preheated air and electrical power straight into your cab without requiring your engine or your bunk heater to burn a single drop of diesel. But these premium spaces are incredibly rare, often completely filled by mid-afternoon, leaving late-arriving drivers to fend for themselves in the dark, frozen outer edges of the lot. Parking in the back rows means you are completely exposed to the full force of the winter gale blowing across the asphalt. If the wind hits the side of your sleeper berth at 40 miles per hour, it creates a severe wind chill effect that can overpower a standard Webasto heater's ability to maintain a stable 70-degree interior. To survive these conditions, you have to physically nose the truck directly into the wind, so the aerodynamic fiberglass aerodynamic fairings on the front hood deflect the air over the top of the cab, creating a calm pocket of dead air directly behind the sleeper. Once the truck is positioned and the thermal barriers are locked down, you have to secure your critical fluids inside the heated living space. Freezing temperatures will instantly ruin standard windshield washer fluid if it is not rated for -40, causing the fluid lines inside the engine bay to burst. Experienced drivers bring their insulated water jugs, electronic logging devices, and extra bottles of fuel additive inside the cab bunk area to ensure they do not freeze solid before morning. Every item must be strategically stowed because space is at an absolute premium, and a loose bottle of liquid freezing under your bed can crack the floor liner. The final task before climbing into the survival bag is monitoring the truck's primary instrument cluster one last time. You check the diesel exhaust fluid gauge, because DEF is 32% synthetic urea and 67% deionized water, meaning it begins to freeze solid at 12 degrees Fahrenheit. While the truck's internal heating lines will thaw the DEF tank once the engine is running, a frozen tank at bedtime means the computer might throw an error code, preventing the engine from starting when your 10-hour break is up. With the gauges verified, you flip off the main cab lights, leaving only the soft glow of the bunk heater controller ticking away under the bed.